Hey, Chris.
Hey, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I am going to jump in and say I do have a prediction on food at home and cooking at home. I absolutely think I'm long on people are going to continue to cook, and unfortunately, I think the restaurant industry is going to take a while to come back. So jumping on the conversation from just before.
Yeah. Not to cannibalize your time, but curious, why?
Why do I see that?
Yeah.
I think the shift is going to be primarily what I've been hearing and seeing is around people's spending habits.
Yeah.
And so I think, even talking to friends anecdotally, my own life, and this isn't consumer research by any means, but it's the shift in people really valuing the dollar and wanting to make sure that their dollars are going further. And I think people have become so comfortable in cooking at home, creating meals, trying new things. And we've been forced to basically, in my case, be in my apartment with my wife and share these meals together. And I think it's just going to be a long-term trend that people are still going to enjoy the experiences. We've looked at millennials, we looked at Gen Z, love experiences. They're still going to want to eat out. But I think when you have the decision to save that $30, $80, $100 in some cases, and you can cook a great salmon meal at home, I think people are going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel similarly after looking at our first post-COVID credit card bill and seeing how much we saved by not eating at home. It really just blew my mind. I mean, everyone always talks about if a millennial doesn't have a, $6 coffee twice a day, that in 20 years they'll be a billionaire or whatever. But I mean, it is crazy how much you spend on coffees and lunches and dinners, especially in urban environments where that convenience has been an attractive proposition. So I hear you.
Well, and I'll say, and I can kind of dovetail into this, but I think savings habits and the consumers that we see with our product is really want to go on a budget, and having a forced ability to budget. But then, like you said, actually seeing your credit card bill, in a lot of cases they don't have credit card bills, but seeing the amount of savings that you've had, I think people are starting to retrain themselves and say, oh, I could pay off my college loan sooner.
Yeah.
If I make these decisions, was it that bad? Yeah, I didn't see my friends, my family, but was it that bad to be cooking at home and making these trade-offs? So I think we're going to see long-term impact restaurants and hospitality and travel in general.
Yeah. Well, so rather than take more of your time with an introduction, maybe you can introduce yourself very quickly and then segue into your presentation.
Sure. I'll jump right into it.
Cool.
Share my screen. Let me know if you can see that.
I can.
So yeah, I'll just jump right in if that works. So Chris Bixby, I'm the VP of Growth at Sezzle. Been at the company for about a year now, and I focus on most things marketing, but then also some of our enterprise relationships and high growth brands that are PE and VC backed. So we are a buy now, pay later company, and that's ultimately what this presentation is going to be about. I always find it interesting to take a step back and talk about the insights that are driving it. So most of this presentation will be about the insights and some research that we've done with others and pulled into this presentation to talk about what are the overall trends and things happening at a younger generation that are driving to this propensity and preference for installments and buy now, pay later. So Stu, I'll jump right in if that works. All right, we'll keep going. Great, we'll keep going. So Sezzle is a digital payments platform that enables consumers to pay over time in installments. We're a pretty simple platform, 4 payments, 6 weeks, 0% interest. 0% interest ever is one of our kind of differentiators compared to some of the other market. We're founded and based in Minneapolis. The product is about 4 years old here. 1.48 million active consumers, over 16,000 active retail partners. We just recently announced, and we're super proud of this and excited about it, we're now a public benefits corp, and that's on our path to become a B Corp and make sure that we take a stakeholder approach for all of our stakeholders, consumers, customers, shareholders, et cetera. And we are publicly traded in on the ASX in Australia. And just have been having a record day. We released our Q2 results earlier this week. Q2 is phenomenal, and we've been very fortunate to continue to see really good growth in the shift to e-com, but also in terms of this preference of a buy now, pay later for consumers. So I'll jump right into it. So before we start kind of going into it, I just want to paint the picture of generations. So we really focus on Gen Z and Millennial. There's a couple of reasons for that in terms of the insights behind them. They're also big. So Millennial, we saw as a major disruption across multiple different industries, from Uber to Airbnb to Warby Parker. They disrupted multiple industries and categories and made the big people really think about them. Gen Z is going to be another big one. And, 1 in 10 is going to be able to vote in this election. They're a generation that thinks differently, acts differently, is also the most diverse in history. Nearly 50% of them are actually going to be, non-white or are non-white. And they're going to make big changes and impacts. So we're super focused on Gen Z and thinking about this next generation. I'll go into it in a second. I'm calling this next generation not Gen Alpha anymore. I'm going to start calling them Coronials. Usually changes in time and generations happen through big impact, and COVID was a massive impact. So staying at home, and through this period and the kind of fear of continuing epidemic or pandemics has basically established a new generation where for Gen Z, it was 9/11. For Gen Alpha, I think it's going to be Coronials, and it's going to be the COVID pandemic. So millennials, we just talked about. Millennials faced a tough time, right? They came out of college, and many of them in the financial recession. They're facing financial trouble in terms of a ton of debt. They didn't have jobs coming out of college or lost them. Their parents did. And then also because of some of the regulations, they weren't able to get access to credit cards in college. And they weren't able to be marketed to, which may be a good or a bad thing. But what we've seen is it's impacted their ability to really understand credit, and it's taken a long time to come back. So millennials fear credit card debt more than dying, threat of nuclear war and some of these other big issues. And that really goes back to, who they were and how they grew up with credit cards, where many of them were given access to things. They were maxing them out. They were ending up being forced to pay, high interest on them. I was talking to a financial expert yesterday who works primarily with millennials, and she's like, the number one thing is trying to get out of credit card debt. And so this is a really big issue. It's across the board and pretty significant. And in this case, 30% of millennials have a credit card. Again, there's different stats on this. You may think there's more. There may be more. There's other stats out there that might say more. But basically, young people and millennials don't have credit card or are rejecting them. So Gen Z users are pretty similar in a lot of ways. They were impacted by the same cultural as well as great financial recession. They saw a lot of different things happen. They're activists. They're diverse. They're globally aware, but again, they were growing up and seeing cousins, parents, et cetera, impacted by the global financial crisis. So they have a lot of the same issues with credit cards. 71% of them are worried about their finances. And overall, we see, again, young people not having access to credit. They don't have credit and they're subprime. And so what they're looking for is other alternatives. And so we'll jump right into it. Preferences are changing. This is a chart that we've been showing actually for a while. It's only through 2018, but we just pulled this data from Visa, and Visa has just come out that says, credit card usage in May has declined by 21%. Debit card volume actually grew by 12%. So this is super consistent with what we're seeing on our side and why people are shifting. And they're shifting to debit because they want to, they're more concerned about cash. And they don't want to extend themselves. And so POS, point of sale installments, are the fastest growing method of payment in the US. We've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in Australia. We've actually seen POS or point of sale installment payments in Brazil for many years, over probably 20. But it's now become digitalized. And we're seeing it the fastest growth in the US, faster than credit cards and even faster than private label payments. So the future of payments is a study that the Center for Generational Kinetics did, and it studied over 1,200 people across the U.S., pretty comprehensive, done by this guy, Jason Dorsey, who's a generational expert. And what it said was consumers overall are using digital payments more than traditional banks. Probably not a big surprise, but when you look at it generationally, you're seeing more and more of that younger generation, Gen Z, are using it much more than traditional banks. And even millennials are using it 78% versus 68%. And overall, we're seeing that shift. The other thing that we're seeing is that consumers' view of installments overall are pretty positive. So the reason that we think they are positive is because they allow things to do differently, extend the dollar, not get behind with payments, and have high interest. But a lot of them see it as a helpful option and even love it. So over 50% of millennials either see it as helpful or love it. Gen Z is a little bit lower, and that's also because we just think they're a little bit newer to the solution. About 95+% of all consumers are aware of it. Gen Z was a little bit lower than that. They're about 90%. So we think some of the love it is having more to do, just they haven't become so as accustomed to it. And then we're also seeing half of our consumers, likely to use it at their favorite store. And so this is one thing that when we talk to, merchants about it and how to retailers and whether use it, whether or not, consumers are looking for it and they want to use it. And so they're very likely, again, Gen Z is a little bit lower, but overall 53%. And they do it because they want to stay on a budget. That's the biggest thing that we see in our surveys, focus groups that we do. We hear people want to be on a budget. They want to do it. They want to do what's right for them. We were talking about restaurants earlier and eating out. People don't do a great job of tracking their expenses, and people that are living paycheck to paycheck, and we think about 80% from what we've seen and the data has shown, about 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So for these groups of people, they have to worry about their finances. They have to worry about making better decisions. And that's one of the main reasons that we see shifting to buy now, pay later. And then ultimately, there's a big benefit for the retailers. Over half would try a new store more, they'd come back more often, and even in cases they'd spend more because it again allows them a period to break it up, whether it's 6 weeks of our product or longer term products. So this just came out actually the other day in Glossy. That said 18% of US consumers confidently are using alternative payments. We think right now in the US, it's just kind of broaching. In Australia, where it's pretty prevalent, it's about 15% of e-commerce transactions are going through buy now, pay later. In the US, I'm not going to say it's less than 10, it's probably less than 5% at this point. But when we're on a website, we're about 10 to 15% of payment volume. So purpose-driven payments, I'm going to just jump into this real quick of where we are. Purpose-driven payments in a challenging time. And so COVID had a massive impact. We know it had a massive impact on e-tail, retail, brick and mortar, et cetera, changing, things that we've already talked about, but multiple impacts. And, a big driver of that has been the 42 million who claimed unemployment. Luckily, a lot of them were furloughed. They had stimulus checks, unemployment still coming in, and that's had positive impact on, I think, some of the e-commerce companies overall. And then ultimately, again, we've been fortunate in our business to be at the right time with this. But there's a lot of people that are struggling. And so when we look at our consumers, we run surveys pretty consistently. So when we look at our consumers, 75% of them at this time, and this is pretty early, this is early April, had already been impacted and their income had already been impacted. 26% of the respondents had lost their job, and then 55% had been, concerned about getting cut back. And when you look at generationally, so that purple chart is Gen Z, younger and millennial and younger, it's disproportionately impacted. And so, but they were still spending. They're spending more online. We also saw other trends that they were spending more locally. So they wanted to support businesses. We launched kind of like some local, we gave the ability for consumers to shop in Canada now. And then also being able to launch even things like Black-owned stores has been really important for our consumers because they want to spend where they want to spend. The dollar, matters more to them. They want to support these things. A lot of them are shifting to online, but a lot of them are also shifting to brands they know, brands they support, female-owned, Black-owned businesses. And so, overall business has been reasonably strong. And then what we looked at is like even the impact it's been having because, finance is so important, right? Like having a good financial situation is so important for our users. And so we saw that even 90% of our users were saying that Sezzle played a bigger role in their lives. 96% said it helped ease their anxieties. And then it helped them get access to things that are really important. So this is just a quote from Ashley that talks about, being able to provide for her children, and be able to actually, order masks through something like this. And this is, Sezzle, we think we got a great brand and a great thing here, but this is consistent across, installments. This is consistent across buy now, pay later, that again, it's playing a role in their life because finance is important. And so we look at buy now, pay later as a connections platform. We think it's more, payments are more than dollar and cents. They're a way to build a relationship with the customer, and it's really a reflection of your brand and how you treat them. So in conclusion, I'll just drop in these kind of 2 last case studies and then turn it over for questions, and we'll love to chat more. But we really see buy now, pay later in general, and this is a case study that we did with Touch of Modern. It has impact across the retailer, and again, it's because of the insights that are driving consumers to it. And so we see 9% card insertion, 4% increase in conversion rates, and then ultimately an impact on revenue. And this is even a recent one that we did. Prima launched in the COVID period, and they're already seeing an increase in basket size. And then Peel is a great brand, super purpose and mission driven, and they were able to add in and see results right away. So it's something that consumers are looking for. It's something that's really interesting, and frankly for me, been super exciting to be a part of. A background in brand management, marketing, some finance. This trend is here, and I'd be happy to chat anything more and go into any more details. But I always like I think the insights are helpful to help show why this is happening.
Yeah, Chris, that's really helpful. And I think generally, setting up kind of the problem space, makes it a lot easier to sell the solution. Let's talk a little bit about who this is best for. I mean, is there a kind of a basket size or a product price point?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Makes most sense. I mean, I can imagine this being great for furniture or consumer electronics, but I'm sure I'm limiting the potential. So how do you think about that?
So it's interesting. Even when I was joining, that was what I knew. I knew a firm, right? Yeah. I knew a firm, larger ticket items, buy the Peloton, buy the mattress, buy the furniture. As we jumped in and started doing the research and really understanding the product, and this is something that frankly, the team had seen for a while, which is that shift from, away from credit cards. People are using this instead, right? And so what we see is for a consumer that's having 2 paychecks a month, they might use their first paycheck to pay rent. And so they don't actually have leftover dollars in that first paycheck to buy something. And so what we see from an AOV standpoint is we're seeing AOVs in the $75 to $150 range. And that's for apparel, footwear, personal care, cosmetics. And it's often because they want something that can extend them that purchasing power in different points, within the month, and then get access to these things. And so we see it do really well at the $75 to $150 price range. That's where our sweet spot is, given that we're a shorter term, zero interest product. For something like an Affirm, which is a longer term, they typically do better on those larger basket sizes, hard goods, hardline goods, furniture, et cetera, where we typically are playing in our current product below $500.
Got it. And if you're a retailer, you get paid right away. Right, so you bear the kind of credit risk, and you get paid as these installments come in. But if you're a prototypical retail customer, you get paid right away.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think you should think of us as a credit card, as a debit card, as a PayPal transaction in terms of your online store. We also do offer an in-store solution, and we're excited when that kind of starts to rebound and come back to be able to provide that. But yeah, we pay out right away. We take all the credit risk. We do the underwriting ourselves. We have access to a pretty large credit facility that gives us ability to underwrite all those deals. And then we see super low default rates, and we haven't seen increases in default rates or issues with our consumer repay, because we basically lend what we think a consumer can afford to pay back, because we're not making money on the interest. We're not making money on having an outstanding balance. We make money on a processing fee that we charge a retailer, because the retailer is seeing higher lifts with us. They're seeing higher insertion rates, higher conversion rates, and then ultimately more revenue. And so that's where we make our money, and we're really proud of that. We're really proud that that's where it is, because we're giving a benefit to the retailer, giving a benefit to the consumer, but we're not making it on the back end of a consumer where credit cards are really making 85% of their fees, off of interest. We make a very small percentage of ours.
Yeah, and just to play that back to you, you make it easier to acquire customers. You make it easier to convert, people down funnel. You make it easier to retain customers. All that's valued by the retailer, and you take a piece of that.
That's exactly right. And our value prop is, again, bringing in that new customer who's looking around and show and let them know that there's a payment option that fits their life. Convert that consumer that's added it to their basket. And then also convert at a high approval rate and get these consumers access to the things that they want. We also see reduced return rates, which has been kind of eye-opening for us. Kind of counterintuitive, but it's again, when a consumer can, because they're usually returning it often because they don't want to pay for it, but you give them the chance to pay over time, we actually see reduced return rates as well.
Right. And then like a question from the audience, just to kind of build on that. Yeah. Buy now, pay later. The history is a little bit messy, with Rent-A-Center and those kind of OG buy now, pay laters where you buy a washing machine and it ended up costing you like $40,000 over like 5 years or 8 years or whatever. Affirm also, has some kind of fine print regarding interest. You don't charge interest. Is there any kind of fine print here like that can get someone trapped under a bigger liability than they thought they'd have coming in?
Yeah, the only time we charge the consumer is if they miss a payment or want to reschedule a payment a second time. So we actually provide a free rescheduled payment one time. And what we typically see is just going back to this is people will line it up with their paycheck. So they'll move it out to a Friday so then they can pay every 2 weeks. We allow a consumer to do that one time. And then we actually gave a second during COVID. We gave a second in terms of financial hardship because we wanted to make sure that consumers pay us back. Again, we want them to pay us back. And that's the most important. So we only lend so much that we think they can afford. And then if they do pay us back, we'll build their credit and their credit limit. But when it comes to like hidden fees, the only fee that if they just totally skip the payment, and then we even have a period, and I think it's 3 days, but I could be off on that. But we have a period of time that if they pay it off, then we waive the fee as well. So we're trying, and we'll cut them off at that point. If they're outstanding and they have an outstanding balance that they're late on, we'll cut them off. They can't get access to more. And again, consumers like that. It's something that, I'm a little, they like that built-in, aspect of it that makes sure we have their back and doesn't put them in a bad situation.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you very much.